So, and you were also modeling on the runway shows for Mugler
And Gautier and Westwood and
wow.
like and really I had like an agency for in New York and one in London, and being represented as a man and a woman, like and a female. Like I would do like a Paul Smith campaign for Japan, and like just weird things. Like
So
strange.
talk about what it was like in the Mugler shows.
The Mugler shows were like, if you were into fashion, it was like the most amazing
big extravaganza
spectacle,
shows. Yeah, spectacle.
Yes, I mean, I remember this one, which was like the 20th anniversary, and like every single model, and everything was like one of my favorite memories is kind of like we all had to get our nails done. So I ended up going to a nail salon, getting into a car with Patty Hearst and Tippi Hedren. And we're all like, and I'm just sitting, I'm like, oh my God, that's Patty Hearst and that's Tippi Hedren. And then there's me, and then we're all sitting there getting our nails done. It's just like, it was like odd, like that wouldn't happen now. No way.
Anywhere.
Nowhere. But back then, it was just like, yeah, all you three go together. It was funny.
That's really bizarre.
Yeah, but it was great. It was so exciting, because, it'd be like, Linda, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what's happening? They're like, Linda wants to move her dressing room closer to the stage. So all of a sudden, like, someone gets kicked out, and it was like madness back there,
And you'd already met Mugler at Suzanne's parties in New York, right?
I did, and I was like, I want to work for you. But it was like, no, be a model. It was like, okay.
So were you influenced, though, by his designs, by his clothes for your own? In what way? What were you taking from him?
I think precision of sort of tailoring, like he was really all about the lines and fit.
Yes.
And then the drama, it's like it was the most dramatic thing happening on runways that I knew of.
Well, and clearly that was already, too, what he liked about Suzanne's parties, because it was all drama.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember asking Suzanne, I was like, why are you not like the star of every single show of his? And she was like, I don't like to be the center of attention. I'm like, what? I was like,
Liar.
I was like, wow. Because I was like, she's the ultimate, like. But he was also like one of those first people of sort of integrating celebrity, like Ivana Trump and like people don't even be like, why would you put Patty Hearst on a runway? It was like really interesting.
Yeah.
To go to those shows. Very different.
Were you at any of those photo shoots? Because he was also really involved in doing those high photography shoots, which were really interesting in retrospect. Really
actually
fabulous.
How I met him. Like I took a job as like a PA, like on a photo shoot in San Francisco.
Really?
Yeah.
So what he was shooting fashion photographs.
Photographs. So we'd be like on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm terrified of heights. And it was one time I was like, oh, can you climb up there? And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I'll do it, but I was terrified. Because all his pictures are like
of course they're totally vertiginous.
Yeah. I let go of it myself. So.
Okay.
But it's good. He started taking pictures of me, and I was like, oh, okay.
Please join me in thanking Zaldy.
Thank you.